All right, I'm here with Ben Post, and we're going to jump into Mark chapter 6 this morning. And Ben and I are just going to have a conversation around Jesus feeding the 5,000. And I just find this passage always interesting because the disciples had been sent out by Jesus. They went out, they saw people being delivered, people being healed, and they come back. And Jesus is like, hey, let's go away. Let's rest a while. And there's this picture that they can't get away from people. People are always following them. And then Jesus says, let's get into a boat. Let's go to a desolate place. Let's just get by ourselves. Let's rest. Let's talk. And it says many people saw that this was happening, and they pretty much outran and beat the disciples and Jesus to this place. And so when they show up, when the disciples and Jesus show up, there's this large crowd that is kind of waiting for them. And I'm just curious, like, Ben, what do you think of that scene? Can you set the scene? You've been to Israel, where exactly are they at?
Well, good morning, everybody. And I am honored to just kind of talk for a few minutes about Mark 6 this morning. And I love this story. In fact, there are two miracles that all four Gospels record. The feeding of the 5,000 is one, and the resurrection of Jesus is the second. So I think that's a really, really big story here for us. And yeah, I mean, Jesus is gaining more and more popularity, if you will. He's hanging out in Capernaum area, which is on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee. And it says that they, got out of the boat and they decided to go away to a different place. There's a few different ideas of where exactly this place is. Tradition puts it at Tabgha, which is, not really helpful for most people, but right along the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee. And then this large crowd of people go and find him. And he just continues to teach, and he continues to, this massive following of people are just fascinated with who this guy was. I've been watching The Last Dance, the documentary with Michael Jordan, the last few weeks. And one of the things that was fascinating to me was just the crowds and crowds and crowds of people that just wanted to get near him. And I think I don't think Michael Jordan is God or Jesus or anything like that, but I think that's just a picture of crowds of people just flocking to get near this person, to try to get tickets to a game, and so all these people flock to Jesus. And they're trying to get away, and he's just like, okay, let's just keep going. Let's just keep teaching these people.
Yeah, and you get the picture of the crowd, and it says 5,000, feeding of the 5,000, but in other, Matthew's gospel says there were women and children there, and so it could have been upwards of 10,000,
Totally.
And thousands of people. And for me, I think this really reveals the heart of Jesus and his character. If I was tired, and if the crowd was pressing in on me, I would not have the reaction that Jesus has. I would have been like, get away from me, I'm tired. And maybe the disciples were thinking that, who knows? But it says Jesus had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he started teaching them. And I often think like teaching, that's pretty interesting. Teaching is a way of shepherding people. Like, hey, this crowd is coming. I'm going to teach them. I'm going to teach them about the kingdom of God. And I just really think this reveals his heart. He didn't dismiss them. He said, all right, I'm going to teach you. I'm going to guide you because you're lost. You're without a shepherd.
Yep. Yeah. And then the people come, and then, the disciples, they say, verse 35, and when it grew late, like after all day, his disciples came to Jesus and said, this is a desolate place, and the hour is now late. Send them away to go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. But Jesus answered them, you give them something to eat. And they said, shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat? Okay, so a denarius was like a day's wage. So hypothetically speaking, $100 a day. Let's translate it to today's monetary amount. So 200 denarii, $100 times 200 is $20,000.
Wow.
So the disciples are like, it would take $20,000 to go and buy bread for all of these people. And Jesus saying, you give them something to eat.
Yeah.
$20,000? What do you want us to do, Jesus?
Yeah. And he's like, and then they come back, like they go from like, hey, let's send them away so they can get something.
Yeah.
Jesus is like, no, you feed them. And then it's interesting. They're like, all we have, a couple loaves and a couple fish, 5 loaves, 2 fish. That's all we have. There's no way that this is going to feed thousands of people.
Yeah. No way.
And I find it interesting, and as the story goes on, it says they have, the 5 loaves, a couple fish, and then Jesus commanded them all to sit down in groups on the green grass, and they sat. And then he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. And I was really struck this week by that fact of bring what you have to the Lord. They're like, hey, this is all we have. We have 5 loaves, 2 fish, and they brought it. And what's interesting is Jesus didn't say, hey, just do away with that. No, he took what they brought, took what they had, and then obviously multiplied it and fed the entire crowd. And for me, that has been challenging this week of just bring what I have. I don't have to bring something that I don't have. I don't have to go looking, just offer myself fully to the Lord and bring to him who I am, what I have. And the crazy thing is he uses that, he takes that and says, okay, I'll do something with this.
Yeah. And he does. And it's just fascinating to me. Like, I think about that all the time, actually. Like, we offer what we have, and somehow God uses what we offer him to change people's lives, to help bring provision, to help whatever it is. Just this week, I got a message from somebody that I was doing ministry with 20 years ago. And this person was like, man, you guys have had such a huge impact on my life. I'm like, that was 20 years ago. And we're just showing up. This is what I've got. I don't really know what I'm doing, but here's my lunch, Lord, and he takes it and he multiplies it and he uses it for his glory.
Yeah. And I never want to underestimate, the value of what we have, like you said, sometimes all we have is, just showing up, and God uses that, if somebody thinks of like, hey, I need to call this person, well, that's what you have. Like, call the person and see what the Lord does. Or, sometimes we think, oh, we have to have the loaves and the fish. No, it can be, less than that. It can be just time, which is very, very significant. And so I think it's so important. Just bring what you have. And we all have something to give. So many people can think like, well, I don't have this talent or this. No, you have something to give. And so bring it. And it says that he took that, he fed them. And I love the line in verse 2 or 42. It says, they all ate and were satisfied.
I know, it's so ridiculous.
It's like
ridiculous.
It wasn't just a little bit like, okay, I got a bite, and it sustained me. It gave me something. No, they were deeply satisfied.
Okay, now let's say there are 10,000 people there, because we'll use Matthew's account with this. Women or men plus women and children. So 10,000 people there. There's 5 loaves. The loaves were probably not like we would buy at Meijer with this nicely sliced bread, loaf of bread. It was probably a piece of pita. So there's 5 pieces of pita. So these 5 pita loaves feed 10,000 people. So there's 1 piece of bread about the size of my head that feeds 2,000 people. And they all ate and were satisfied. And they all ate and were satisfied. And then Jesus says, okay, go and pick up all the leftovers. And they go and they pick up 12 baskets full of leftovers, which is more than what they started with by far.
It's true. Yeah.
More than they started with by far. And so when I think about this story, I think it's a familiar story for many of us who've been, connected to a church for a while. It's one of 2 miracles that's recorded in all 4 Gospels. Like, do we really believe this story happened? Do I really believe that Jesus can take 5 small pieces of bread and multiply in such a way to feed 10,000 people, for them to all eat and be satisfied and then have leftovers afterwards.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous to me. And I love this story because this shows that God is a God who can provide. And when I think about the world that we're in right now and the economic status that we have in our world right now, and people are just desperate there are people without jobs and people without food and people who are wondering where the next meal is going to come from. And God is a God who can provide, and he will provide just enough. Do we trust him? Do we trust to offer what we have and that he will take care of the rest?
Yeah, I love that. God has the power to provide, in every situation, in every circumstance. And I think this is such a powerful picture that Jesus has the power to do that. Like, I'm going to provide for this massive crowd. But I also think, it really communicates, again, the character and the heart of Jesus, because it's not just about, hey, I'm going to give you something small. It's like, no, he wants us to be deeply satisfied. And sure, here they were deeply satisfied. Their bellies were full. But I think that's a picture of something even so much greater, that Jesus alone satisfies the deepest desires of our hearts. Hop over to John chapter 6. And there you see this story again, Jesus feeding the 5,000. But then he goes on to say, I am the bread of life. If anyone comes to me, they will not thirst or hunger anymore. And so I just think, what are the things that we're looking to in this world, in our life, that we're looking to satisfy us, but in the end will leave us empty. And it's just a reminder that only Jesus will satisfy the deepest longing of our soul, because at the end of the day, we were created by him, but we were created for him. And so only he's going to satisfy the very reason that we were created. And so I'm just praying for myself, for Moran, for others, that we would find our deep satisfaction in Jesus and Jesus alone.
Amen. Amen.
Thanks for hopping on. Thanks for this conversation.
Yeah, man. It's good to see your face.
Nice to see your face. I wish it was in person.
Likewise.